Hi, this is Sharda Ugra. Good afternoon and welcome to a very interesting conversation I'm about to have with the sports editor of Hindustan Times, Rudraneil Sengupta. This is about the column I wrote for the Hindustan Times this week, which is about what this year has meant to us in terms of as sports journalists with reference to sort of celebrity, stardom, all the big idols and what's happened. And of course, we are going to talk primarily with Rudra about the arrest and virtually almost what looks like the downfall of India's most successful individual Olympian, Sushil Kumar, the wrestler. Rudra wrote a fantastic book called Enter the Dangal, talking about the landscape of Indian travel. And I'm just going to turn it over to him and say, Rudra, your first response to when you heard about Sushil, mine was complete disbelief. What about you?
Oh, same here. I was at first I couldn't believe it, and I thought maybe it was just a rumor or like some kind of misinformation, and he was not involved. And I kept thinking that okay, the next day we'll hear a clarification from Delhi police that he was actually not present, that it happened outside Chhatrasal Stadium, which is where the wrestling school is, where Sushil grew up, and all kinds. But that didn't happen, and it increasingly seems clearer and clearer that yes, it was him who was involved in what was basically, if our viewers don't know, on 4th May, a young wrestler, 23-year-old wrestler called Saga, who was training at Chhatrasal Stadium. He died after a brawl at the stadium late at night between two groups. And the Delhi police claims that one of the groups was led by Sushil Kumar, and that he was the one who instigated it, and there was some property dispute which he for which he wanted to instill some fear into this guy, and he got some of his associates, went and picked up this guy from his apartment nearby, brought him to the stadium, then they beat him up. So this is what the Delhi police are saying, and it seems like there is actually a video of the incident which again Delhi police claim that they have in possession. um, so it seems increasingly clear. So of course at first it was disbelief, and then as more and more reports started coming in, I had to believe that this is what had happened. And it's really personal for me because I have known him since 2008, since he won his first Olympic medal. I spent a lot of time with him, so I actually sort of count myself as more of a friend than anything else. It had stopped being a journalistic relationship at some point, just because I hung out with him so much, because I was writing a book, and a large part of the book was about his experience, how he became a wrestler, his growth in the system. Um, uh, and so he became a friend, and I was very comfortable with him. I stayed in his house. I was with his parents, and I was so used to eating lunch and dinner with him. So I felt really sad that it has come to this, and yeah, and that's where it stands right now.
And did
Still
you ever
processing.
get? Yes, still processing. Did you ever get a sense of, since you know him well, is to message him and say, hey, listen, what is this? Because when I don't know Sushil that well, I met him about 4 years ago when I was doing the piece about his and Narsing's, that whole drama that happened.
Right.
And one of the more interesting things in this entire sort of sorry saga is that when you saw the video of Sushil walking out with all the policemen surrounded by them, head under a towel, the other man alongside him, they said his name was Ajay. And I'm looking at him and I realized that this was the same Ajay Kumar Sehrawat, whose number was given to me as the person to contact if I wanted to go and set up a meeting with Sushil at Sonipat. And that's what happened. And Ajay was very personable, very young, very personable, well spoken, helpful. And you're looking at this and saying, who are these people? What has gone on behind this entire exercise that you see? And then you're hearing all the other stories. So I can't comprehend how tough it must be for you because you know him. My first reaction when the news came is, oh, let me contact Ajay and let me see what it is. But of course, I realized I only had some glitch in the phone. I didn't have a number. I just had the name and something got eaten up. And then I realized he's there. He's the guy walking alongside him. He's in the middle of all this. Any sense did you? And you're hearing all the stories now of the gangsters and whatever and all the rest of it. It's beginning to sound like one of those sort of gangster movies in Hindi heartland kind of movies that are going to come soon. But any idea that there was this going on? You knew that in wrestling, because it was a very, very mass sport, it was very much part of the grassroots of North India, particularly Haryana, uh, where all of us, we know how close it is, Haryana, Sonipat, everything. So I'm just thinking that you have any idea this anything like this was brewing in the making? I thought, okay, wrestlers fight and you had all kinds of incidents whenever there's a trial in Chhatrasal or in the indoor stadium, some fight breaks out and all that kind of hatapai goes on, but not this, murder in that sense, killing.
Yeah. No. I had absolutely. Well, I mean, to answer, it's complicated to answer this. Really, I'll break it down into two parts. One is the gangster bit. I had absolutely no idea that there was any kind of gangster involvement in anything, and and obviously I cannot claim that. Firstly, I hung out with Sushil between 2008 and 2013 or 14, and since then it's only been I would call him sometimes and he would call me sometimes, and that's it. So I didn't really know how his life was panning out, and I didn't spend time with him at Chhatrasal or at his home since 2014. So it's been quite some time. But the time I spent there, and of course that was a different time because he was right in the middle of the peak of his wrestling career. He had already won an Olympic medal. He was going to win a second one in London Olympics, and he was gearing up for that the Olympics. Soon after that, he had this obsession that, okay, I didn't win a gold at London, he won a silver, so I need to change that into a gold for Rio. So he had immediately come back and started training. So he spent all his time wrestling, right? So it was obsessive. I would get to Chhatrasal on most days at 4:30 in the morning, or 5 in the morning actually, and by 4:30 they were up and they had started training, and they would continue training till around 9:30, after which they would make their breakfast, bathe, go to sleep, get up, start talking
Train
about
again.
wrestling, start looking at wrestling videos, say, okay, in the evening training session, this is what we're going to focus on. Then there would be a long 2 hour, 3 hour evening training session. Then eat, go back to sleep. That was basically what life was like. So I had no idea. Now, on the other hand, the area where Chhatrasal is, which is northwest Delhi, where Sushi lives, which is near Bhawana, where Sushil's coach Satpal Singh, who's the founder of the wrestling academy at Chhatrasal. He's an old family from Bhawana. Now Bhawana is well known as being the gangster hub of Delhi. This is where most of our gangsters come from. In fact, one of our most notorious gangsters is his name is Neeraj Bhawana because he comes from there. He's in jail right now, but there is a lot of gang activity happening. So it's not surprising that they would have come across gangsters, especially because you'll have these local wrestling competitions. Like you said, wrestling is very grassroots. It's very mass. So when you had local competitions, you didn't know who was funding the prize money, and it could very well be that the local gangster of repute there would be the one who says that I will give a lakh to this dangal, right? And so then there are these connections being made between the wrestlers, between the organizers and the gangsters. So, but I didn't know any of it. The other part of this is that, of course, uh, it's a very macho culture. There were always guns around, for example, and I had asked Sushil once that you and your associates, you guys have so many guns lying around. What's the reason for this? And they never traveled without the guns. They always had them with them. If they went out in the car, there would always be a couple of guns in the car.
That
And
was your clue,
though I
Rudro.
never saw them
That was
take
the
out,
clue. That was the clue.
yeah, I but I spent so much time with them. I never saw them taking the
Yeah,
guns out for anything. It was always
yeah,
kept
yeah,
there. And I had
yeah,
asked him, and he said, "Well, firstly, they are all licensed. These are all licensed weapons." And the second thing is, he said that,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
we are always traveling in areas where the risk is very high because there's a lot of gangsters
Mm.
here, and we'll go, let's say, to a dangal, and we'll win a whole lot of prize money. We don't want to get caught with all that prize money,
Robbed.
without
Yeah,
protection.
yeah.
Um, yeah, robbed, and you look at them and they're so muscular and macho, and they all drive their big cars and all this. So the guns kind of almost like fit into that picture, that yes, okay, so these guys, they'll never use them, but this is what they're like. Um, but
Yeah.
I had the feeling that this kind of sets up a scenario where if things go wrong, things can go very wrong.
Mm,
And
mm.
that's what happened, because
Yeah.
like you said, they always had brawls at these selection trials, at these dangals. People will start fighting, they don't agree with what the referee said. Somebody accuses somebody else of doing something illegal, and the two camps start fighting. And imagine in that scenario, both camps are equipped with guns. Somebody takes out
Yeah.
a gun,
Yeah.
something happens, that's it, right? So
Mm, mm.
yeah, so I always had the feeling that yes, something could go wrong, but I never really believed that it would, because on the other hand, Sushil was always, to me, a very gentle, a very stable, gentle, kind person. I never saw him lose his temper, never saw him being mean or beating up anybody or anything like that.
And it's interesting that you say stable, because that's the word that I think talks, sort of reflects about him to anyone who meets him at a formal level, like a journalist like me would. Very,
Yeah,
very stable, very, very, what they say, grounded, in what they're
yeah,
doing. Very aware of, I think, very aware of his skill and his ability and his achievements, but at the same time grounded. That he's not going to mess with
yes,
wrestling. What is his art, and there is a bit of there's religion involved in it as well, there's a spirituality involved in it, and then it becomes this, but it's all, I guess, mixed up, in the sport, and mixed up in sort of the environment, that the sport sort of breeds and lives and is successful in, around, particularly in that part of the country.
right. And it also raises a question about that has always kind of interested me about athletes and sports people, and I'm sure you have tackled this before, is that you have most sports people, they come into the sport really young. So Sushil was like 8 or 9 years old when he started wrestling. He was only 12 when he first entered Chhatrasal, and he has spent his
Mm,
entire life knowing this lifestyle where he gets up in the morning and he trains, and then he goes to sleep, then he gets up again and trains, then he goes to sleep, and then there's a tournament coming up and all his attention is to the tournament. When that competitive life of the sport is taken away from you, I think most
mm,
athletes find it very difficult to find a balance. And for Sushil, that had happened, right? So he was less and less of a wrestler in the last few years, and more sort of an administrator at Chhatrasal. And I don't think he
yeah.
was meant to be that kind, playing that role. So I think he had a lot of empty time. I'm just conjecturing here, but it raises that question that when he was obsessively following wrestling, and clearly athletes are obsessive people, he had something to
Mm.
focus all his energies on, and maybe there is something about having lost that center of attention, that center of focus, and what do you do when that happens? So that
Yeah.
question always is there.
It's possible. It's very much possible, because then a lot of athletes are not able to cope with what is the life around it. And I think particularly with people of Sushil, and even say someone like now like Mary Com, of their ability, it's like they want to keep pushing themselves till literally,
Right.
they stop, they fall on, they just literally collapse, because they don't have that in them, because sport is a young person's profession largely, and combat sport even more. So
Yes.
even the whole 2016, the Rio Olympics scenario, and all the sort of the tug and pull around Sushil and Narsingh was this as well. This was a wrestler whose prime whose prime was possibly past, because he got his world championship medal,
Yes.
he got all the, he'd done all those things, and he was still fighting to claim that space. And like you're saying, this is the space that is left, and what do you do? I mean, I don't think these are fundamentally violent people. I mean, a lot of boxers say no, because they know, because they know the strength, and they understand their power of their physical power. So they tend not to be violent. I found that the bigger boxers, the middleweight, heavyweight, those they just tend to be quieter and quieter people. But I'm speaking just, I mean, I've met some 10 instead of,
Yeah.
who are not Mike Tyson kind of a thing. but they tend to be
Yeah.
quieter and quieter because they know that they can damage, with one punch, they can possibly kill people in that sense, knock them out, cause them injury, send them to
Yeah.
hospital. So it's what you're saying is probably a good kind of a good kind of answer. I think if everyone's looking for just some explanation that we need to kind of hold on to at a time like this, where we are trying to sort of grapple with this great athlete that was there, and this person who is now in behind bars, wanted for a string uh, crimes and charged with so many things. So what what's brought? I wrote the column, as you know, with this
Mhm.
whole thing saying that literally this last 12 months have been almost devastating in that sense for what athletes have come to mean to us. Like the top athletes, like I call the A-listers, have come to stand for. That was my sense of great loss. And sometimes saying, no, you're just over expecting too much of them. They're not sort of great. Yeah, they're young people finally, but you're saying, there's a lie. So I don't know whether you agree with me that there's been just vast disappointment that has been there on one hand, that all these personalities, athletic personalities, have sort of fallen short in terms of standing up and being spokespeople or ambassadors for their sport. And at the same time, we are seeing just a mass of unknowns and less successful, less talented people coming, or less famous people coming out and saying, no, we are here for our community, whether it's our neighborhood, whether it's people on Twitter who need help, whether it's the vast sort of millions and millions of people that are undergoing this trauma of the pandemic. I don't know whether you feel in that sense, this sort of sense of you have to separate themselves from their athletic beings. They are not the people they are advertised to be almost.
Oh, absolutely, and this is and we've spoken about this before on the phone. In fact, our sense of loss at this seeing what is unfolding before us, but also as you wrote in the column, that it gives us an opportunity to kind of see who the real champions are in that sense of the word that you wanted to use it. The real heroes, the real champions, people who actually stand for a cause, who go out on the limb to do something and to help. Um, and 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 when I felt really a very strong sense of loss, especially when the second wave was like really raging through India, and there were so many deaths, and
Yeah,
everything around us was so tragic and depressing and
awful.
scary. Um, and uh, and the IPL was going on, and we had spoken about this when that was happening, and the IPL was going on, and it seemed that the cricketers just did
Yeah.
not have any kind of, I mean, they did not acknowledge at all on their public platforms that anything was happening. All you
Yes.
saw were advertisements, sponsored tweets, and sponsored social media things, or just their selfies and things like that, and it felt really like there's a serious mismatch between what was happening. And what point of time, the caravan had moved from Bombay to Delhi, and the two worst hit cities,
Yes.
and that was still going on. And I remember that the two of us were talking and we were discussing, and I mean, do they not know? I mean, is that the kind of bubble they're in, that they don't know at all what's happening? Can't they just say or come out for a match and observe a minute silence for those who have passed, or
Yeah.
wear a black band, or show some sign of the great upheaval that everybody was living through. And and of course, to be fair, I don't want to paint everybody in one paint color, because obviously there were others who did things, especially Ashwin, for example, who was one of the first people to start talking about it, and he even pulled out of the IPL. The Pathan brothers are like really great social workers. They were fully mobilized during the worst part of the pandemic. And there were lots of other
Yeah.
people like that, and people that we don't know, that the people you wrote about in your column. Grassroots level people who went out and helped with whatever means, with whatever they had.
Like the football players, the football players across the country,
Oh yeah.
who are sort of their top players came up. That was quite something. And I think it has almost, so in this conversation that I had, very very quickly, I must tell you that one of the people I spoke to, I said, what about the top players? Did you have? He said, वो ऊपर वाले लोग यहाँ नीचे नहीं आते. The people at the top, they're not in touch with us down here. So you would have to think that there is this big mismatch. There is this big mismatch of almost of lives that are led in a bubble. And it's not so one of the first players to come out and talk about the pandemic and talk about all the loss and the grief was Jaydev Unadkat, who came out and spoke about it, and on his social media feed, on video, and it was just a thing to do. And then we realized how many players, men, women, have lost family, lost parents. Again, it's been an absolutely devastating time for everyone across sport. You're reading stories about players, former players, the current players being bereaved. It's a terrible time. But but you're seeing it is literally, and on top of this, you had this Sushil thing happening to say, in case you needed a message, this was a message that all of us had to get, that we had to be able to spot, to make that clear distinction in our head when we're writing, talking, thinking, seeing, or whatever's happening in sport at the moment. Hopefully, it'll change. We don't know. There are many other stories are spinning out as they are. But thanks so much, Rudra, for chatting. It's been fun. We'll keep chatting. There's always lots to chat about. Thanks very much. And we'll always your last favorite Sushil memory before I sign off, if you can remember. It's too
Of
fast.
course. I mean, I remember so well because it is my favorite Sushil memory. It's not my last one. I have lots of favorite moments, but the most favorite thing that ever happened to me was that he showed me a few moves on the mat. Right? He invited me over and he said, let's just do a few things. You're always so interested and you're always following and you're always asking me these questions. How did you do that? How did you do this? And he said, let me show you some stuff. And it was so much fun because of course he didn't hurt me. It was very, very gentle. But at the same time, he showed me how technically he manipulates a body, and it was incredible. I mean, I had no idea that you could put some pressure on the tricep area and that would immobilize my entire hand.
Goodness.
There's a little twist, and I'm like flying over his shoulder, and I'm landing on the mat, and he had control over me the entire time, right? So even when I landed on the mat, it was not a bad experience. It was just really soft, and except that I had just gone like 360 degrees, and it was so I had a lot of fun, and I had a lot of fun learning from him how these things work, and it was great. So that was my last memory. It happened in Chhatrasal Stadium, in fact, on the in the wrestling hall just outside the stadium.
Oh, this is just a great way to sort of end, to remember the essence of what will, I think, get forgotten as time passes. That is what will go slowly. I have this fear that it will happen, but that's a great story. I'll always remember you telling me the story, and me and actually planting in my head about what athletes can do. But thanks very much, Rudra. Great fun chatting with you.
Thank you so much. Bye.